Hi, this is Kristine Lazar, and you just saw my special segment on special ed budget cuts within LAUSD. I wanted to get more in depth on the topic, so I sat down with special education teacher Lisa Bennett to talk about why these cuts are happening and why she thinks they're premature and how they'll impact our special needs community. Okay, Lisa, well, thank you for joining me. I've gotten to know you over the past couple of months talking about this very important topic.
Yes.
Let's start with a little bit more about you, what you do for the district and how long you've been doing it.
Certainly. So I have been a special education teacher for 17 years. This was my 17th year. I have always been working at Van Gogh Elementary in Granada Hills, and I have worked as a special day class teacher, as a resource teacher, and also have done some intervention as well. My last 5 years, I've been special day class with 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade students. But 17 years with the school district and honored with LAUSD Teacher of the Year in 2019.
Well, congratulations on that. I know that's well deserved. And I think a lot of people don't understand what a special education day class is and how that's different than, say, mainstreaming special education students.
Yes. So a special day program is, we have a continuum of least restrictive environment programs for students. So we obviously always want to have special ed students in the least restrictive environment. So that could be a gen ed class with some resource support. So they're getting support from a special ed teacher, either in the classroom or maybe pulled out for some minutes. A special day program is slightly more restrictive because the students need a smaller class setting in order to access the curriculum. So what we do is we have a much smaller class setting. Our norm number is 12 for a special day program, specific learning disabilities. There are different special day programs depending on disability. So we may have an autism class on the core curriculum, we may have autism class on the alternate curriculum, but the special day programs are just a much smaller setting to really support the students with smaller ratios of educators to teachers, and then therefore they're getting much more intensive instruction.
And I think that's one thing that people, I myself didn't understand, because we hear a lot of inclusion, mainstreaming, not having anything separate. But you as a special education educator, and even parents told me that mainstreaming isn't always fair or equal, and it isn't always the best thing for every special education child, which is why you need these day programs where they actually have their own classroom.
Absolutely. And, I am for full inclusion for the right student that it works for. And when we talk about full inclusion, we are talking about a special ed student being in a gen ed class all day long. Now, those gen ed classes can be as large as 35 or 40 students. There are some students that it is not going to support their needs in a class with that size, even if there is a special ed teacher in the classroom with them. So, again, we look at it as a team with the parents, the administration, the special ed teacher. We look at where we think is the best environment for their child. And it could be a special day program, which is, like I said, self-contained. Now, that doesn't mean they don't have opportunities to mainstream with gen ed students. My students in my class would be with me in the morning for the core academics of English language arts, writing, and math. And then at lunchtime, they would go to a gen ed class. They would be with their peers. They're then with them in the afternoon for science, social studies, art, PE, and all the other things. So they still have opportunities for inclusion, but just not for the core academics, which is the area of their most need.
And so now that we're talking about the need for this special education day class, let's talk about what's happening to at least a dozen that we know of throughout the district. What were you told as the special education day class teacher at Van Gogh Elementary a couple months ago?
Yeah, so back in March, I was told that I was notified that my class was going to be closing due to low enrollment, projected low enrollment for the next school year, 2022 to 23. And my 7 students that I currently have, one of them was going to be matriculating to middle school. So then I have 6 4th grade students that they would be sent off to another school, to another special day program. But at that time, They were not clear where that was going to be, not clear on how many students were going to be in that class. It seemed like what they're trying to do is condense the special day programs, and which then may put the special day programs that they go to in excess of the norm number, which means we're now going to have bigger class settings for special day programs if they're going to have to start condensing them. So that's what I was told a few months ago, that they couldn't justify keeping my class open.
And, you know, I have 3 children in LAUSD schools. I know how attached we become to our schools, but I have typical kids. I don't have any special learners. Can you explain what that is like to have special needs families who have grown, maybe been there since kindergarten, and then say you're going to a different school? What does that do to them academically, emotionally, socially?
It's devastating. It was very devastating for my parents. And they didn't tell their children right away because they were just trying to figure out what would be the best way to approach it for them, because they do have different needs and their emotional needs are different. They may not be as well developed as maybe their gen ed peers in understanding what's going on or how to react to it. So social emotionally, it was very devastating. And you know, eventually the children did start to hear, yes, the class is closing and you're going to have to be leaving. And I know I've had parents tell me that their child is crying at night because they don't want to leave the school. They don't want to leave my classroom. I had a student last week who was just really puzzled but why his aide was moving to another school, and he just didn't understand. He said, I don't understand what's going on. And then I said, well, we talked about that you're going to be moving on because the class is closing and you're going to be going to a new school. And he just was very, very confused and just became completely shut down, emotional, depressed. And, you know, it really has had a devastating effect on the families and on, more importantly, because what this is all about is our students, and it's their well-being that should be the most important thing that we think about at this time after a global pandemic, after distance learning, that really thinking about their emotional needs. And, you know, the district just did not provide. Initially, they said, oh, we're going to push all of the students together to one school. But when it came around to reevaluating their IEP, which is the document that states what services they'll be provided and which school, suddenly every child was being offered a different school. And the parents refused to accept that.
And one of the things I've heard from parents of special needs kids, not just for this story, but any story I've done, is that there's often a feeling of being a second-class citizen. There's often a feeling of having to advocate for your child more than parents of typical kids need to or have to. How does this kind of compound that feeling in the community?
Oh, 100%. The idea that any parent should have to fight for their child's right to be educated in the most appropriate setting is just gut-wrenching and heart-wrenching, because our parents are already dealing with the fact that their child does have a learning disability, whatever the disability is. It's a learning disability, if it's autism, if it's a moderate severe disability, they already have that going for them. That to have to expend their energy on fighting for the rights of their child to be educated in the best appropriate setting, it's just outrageous. It is just beyond comprehension. Our gen ed peers and our parents of our gen ed peers do not have that fight on their hands. They don't have to go to a school and fight to get what they need for their child. They're getting it in the gen ed classroom. But the idea that they're, you know, at the end of the day, what a lot of this boils down to is money, and special education costs money. And so, you know, being able to save some money by cutting back in areas, and that's where they're treated as second-class citizens. And every child deserves the free and appropriate public education in whatever form is most suitable for that child.
Now, LAUSD would not give me an interview on this. They wouldn't give me numbers. They just gave me a statement. But I'm sure you're asking, because I hear it from teachers and parents, what about all that COVID money we got? You know, there is extra money, right? Why do you feel like special education has gotten any of that money, or What do you think?
It's interesting. I don't know what's going on with the COVID money. It's all very kind of, maybe there's some going here and some going here. It's not very transparent in how they're spending the money. What we would have liked to have seen as educators who are being forced to leave our classrooms and find jobs elsewhere, and what our parents would have liked to have seen, is a 1-year moratorium on any closures, so that we have this full year of school that is not affected by the pandemic, that students can get assessed to determine if they need special ed services, which they will. There is a backlog of assessments, there has been, and just to have one more year of catch up and then decide, especially in the case of my students, and I know there are other classes around the district that are closing that are in similar situations, but I have fourth graders. They are losing out on their 5th grade final year at the elementary school that some of them have known since kindergarten. And that's this one student who was really depressed last week after not understanding. He said, well, what about my friends? And I said, well, this one and this one is also going to go to the same school. He said, yeah, but what about my other friends? And the realization to him that the friends he's made since kindergarten, that he's not going to be with them next year. And as we're sitting watching 5th grade culmination rehearsals or watching the 5th grade kickball game, I'm getting sad because my students are not going to experience that next year. They'll be at another school, and I'm sure there's amazing things going on at other schools and they do incredible things, but there's still that connection that they had with kids since kindergarten. And again, there's that social emotional part. So money could have been spent. We could have saved these classes. I understand that enrollment is down. I understand that. But we didn't even give it a chance, not even a full year of being able to get through the backlog of assessments.
Thank you so much for joining me and going a little more in depth. And I have one last question for you. I know you're closing down your classroom. Your appeal was denied. Maybe some good news will be had over summer. But in the meantime, do you know where you're going next year?
I do. Just this past week, I was offered a position within the Division of Special Ed with LAUSD at a school which is fairly local to where I live. And it's a middle school, so it's a little bit of a change for me from elementary. I've been at elementary for 17 years. And so it's a bittersweet. I'm glad that I've been able to find a position. But at the same time, I'm excited about the new position, but at the same time, I'm still incredibly sad. Tomorrow will be a sad day as I say goodbye to my school of 17 years and my students. Yeah.
And I know I always hear from my kids' teachers that there are babies, but they're your babies too. So I know how
My
emotional this is
kids.
for you.
They are my kids. I only, and I talk about my parents, and sometimes people think I'm talking about my parents back in England. I'm not, no, my kids' parents, because they are my parents, they are my kids. Every one of them that's been through my class in the last 17 years will always be my kids.
All right. Well, thank you for talking to me. Hopefully there will be some good news over the summer.
Thank you,
I know you
Kristine.
guys are still holding on to hope, and we'll continue to explore the issue.
Thank you so much. And I really appreciate you taking the time to look deeper into this. It is an important issue, and that we really work to save special education services in the district.